Joined by Nathan Gotch with Gotch SEO. Now, Nathan has been in the SEO space for a long time, over a decade, and he comes on today to talk about the different things that he's seen move the needle today in SEO, the dirt, as he calls it. And he says, I've got the dirt, and I said, well, let's go ahead and get dirty. So we tend to focus today's topic on a couple of different key areas that are important for website owners. The first is this big, large topic of keyword research. And Nathan goes about it from a variety of different standpoints, which I think is really interesting. First, he tackles updating content first and foremost before going ahead and writing new content. He talks about what to look for, where you're positioned and where you rank, and then what types of content to create as a result of that. We then get into keyword research, how to analyze competitors, what keywords to start with, and it's a little different than what he sees most people starting with. He talks about intent, and he gives an outline for actually how to score every single keyword that you find, so that then at the end of your keyword research process, you know which keywords to write about first, second, third, etc. His scoring process alone is worth the listen. I think it's really valuable, and I'm going to start using that a little bit more often in what I do. We move into the second half of the interview talking about content quality, what makes content quality, and then kind of bounce in between that in terms of link building, because he believes link building is so vital in terms of just getting content to rank. And so we do bounce back and forth between that. What type of content to create, where to put your efforts to generate links from a content perspective, i.e. link bait. And he shares a lot of details about how to find that. We finished the conversation by talking just about how important he thinks it is to be involved in whatever niche you are targeting and writing about. That going forward, it's probably more important than ever before. So I don't do a lot of talking in this interview here. I basically just give Nathan a question or two and let him run. The guy is a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of experience, and I think you'll hear that throughout the different things he says in the interview. Enjoy. Before we jump into this podcast, Brandon Gailey, the founder of Rank IQ, who is also the sponsor of this episode, will share an exciting finding from a 1-year organic traffic study of Mediavine and Raptive bloggers.
Thanks for allowing me to come on and share this with your audience. So, we recently did an extensive study comparing Mediavine bloggers who are active Rank IQ users versus Mediavine bloggers that don't use Rank IQ. This gives you a nice apples to apples comparison of established bloggers who are typically using some kind of keyword research tool like Rank IQ. Our study looked at 2,300 Mediavine blogs and the organic Google traffic that they've received over a 12-month period. We also segmented the bloggers in the study into 3 groups by their traffic size. Across all 3 traffic segments, the study found that Mediavine bloggers using Rank IQ ended up with an increase of 4.68 times the monthly Google traffic of the Mediavine bloggers not using Rank IQ. We did the same study with 1,100 AdThrive bloggers, which is now called Raptive. And across all 3 segments, we found that Raptive bloggers using Rank IQ ended up with an increase of over 5 times the monthly Google traffic of Raptive bloggers not using Rank IQ. For those of you that don't know about Rank IQ, we are the only SEO toolset made just for bloggers. Rank IQ has a hand-picked library of the lowest competition, high traffic keywords for every niche and a content optimization tool that guides you in creating the most helpful kind of content that Google loves.
To see the results of this study and find out more about Rank IQ, hit the pause button right now and go to rankiq.com. That's rankiq.com. All right, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman, and today we are joined by Nathan Gotch with GotchSEO.com. Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is great to have you. You have been someone that I've followed for quite a long time in this industry. You've been doing SEO. You've been publishing a lot of SEO content for quite a long time. And we're going to be talking all about it. I tell you, I've been looking forward to this one. I'm going to hit you with some, hopefully not too tough questions, but I'm looking forward to getting some of your insights. But how about you, before we get into it, maybe bring us up to speed on who you are, give us some background.
Sure. Yeah. So I discovered SEO in 2011. And I discovered it because I had started a baseball pitching blog and I had no clue how to get traffic to it. So I went to Google and, actually reverse this. I started the blog and I tried a bunch of stuff. I created all this content. I had no clue what I was doing. And nothing was working. Right. So I did this for a few months and I went back to Google and I said, all right, how do I get traffic to my blog? And come to find out, there were a few ways. Obviously you could pay for traffic. That was one option. But then there was this one option that was, hey, you can actually get it for free from Google. And I was like, wow, that works perfect for me because I'm a broke college student. I can't pay for anything. So this is the perfect option. And so I, started everything I would learn, I'd go and implement on this baseball pitching blog. And I just kept learning and learning. I was like, oh, that worked. And then all of a sudden I started getting traffic. I started making money from AdSense. Like the first actual real money I made online, I was like, whoa, people are clicking on things. This is great. And then I made my first affiliate sale. And this was like, I think it was December or January, kind of 2011, 2012. I made this first affiliate sale through ClickBank. And I was selling a baseball pitching program. It was called, it's actually, I think it's still around actually, 3X Velocity is the name of the program. And I made $47 commission. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened. And then at the time, my plan when I was going into my senior year was that I was going to be a lawyer. So at least that's what my family thought I was going to do. So, but in my mind, I was like, no, this is what I want to do. Because I was just like, when I saw that money come in, I was like, this is incredible. I love this. And so I started really doubling down on just learning more SEO and just investing in the same website. And it kept growing. And then I was like, man, I just love this SEO stuff. I just became really obsessed with it. So then I kind of had this, I didn't come with this idea. I was following, I don't know if you know at the time, Alex Becker was someone who I was following in those days. Despite what you think about him, what they think about him, but he really helped me discover that you could sell SEO services to businesses, right? And that was something I didn't really even know was a thing. And I was like, wow, that sounds pretty cool. I could definitely do that because I know how to do SEO. And so for me, I started creating websites just to refine my SEO skills. I always tell people this, they're like, that's so weird, but I wasn't really doing it to make money. I was literally doing it just because I would want to just keep testing myself and keep seeing if I could do it. So I created, under counter ice maker reviews, TRX reviews, Bowflex reviews, and I learned a lot in that process. One funny thing is when I created BowflexReviewsHQ.com, that one, I was really cooking with that one. I was making all kinds of affiliate sales through the Bowflex affiliate program, and I was doing super well. And then one day I get an email from Bowflex like, hey, by the way, you can't use our name in your domain. And I was like, oh, okay. So that killed that project pretty quickly. And then I learned a valuable lesson. But for me, I was just obsessed with creating these sites. And back then, it was much easier. I wouldn't do the same thing I did back then now because SEO takes so much longer to see outcomes. Yeah. But at that time, I could put a site up, hit it with some PBNs or whatever else I was using at the time, and it would go right. Those days are not. That's not the way I
Panda, pre-Penguin.
Correct. Yeah. So and so that was kind of the way I did SEO for a long time, was kind of the gray hat kind of way of doing things. And then in 2013, I graduated in 2012, and then from 2012 to 2013, I was just working a security job, and it was horrible. I hated it. And every single second that I was working that job, I was thinking about SEO. I was thinking about my projects. It was all I would ever think about. So every waking moment that I had that was not working the traditional job, I was working on my projects. It's quite obsessive, honestly. It was pretty crazy what I was doing. I was working 16, 17-hour days just to be able to work on my projects. But I was like, I'm going to make these sacrifices now because I see a vision of me making money with SEO. I just knew I could do it. So then in 2013, I actually got laid off from that security job, and I had to make a decision. I was like, am I going to like stay here in or stay in LA, try to get hired by an SEO company, or I can move to St. Louis and be with my wife. She was my girlfriend at the time. And so I made the decision to pack my stuff up, didn't have a lot of stuff, and I drove to St. Louis. And my goal was that I was going to get hired by an SEO company over here, SEO company, digital marketing company. It really didn't matter to me. I just wanted to get hired in general to do SEO. So I literally applied to every single job that existed, like literally every single thing that I could find. And I got one call. Actually, I got one response and I got one interview and I did not get the job. So I had moved over here. I had no job. I had no clients and I had a credit card with a $500 limit. So I was like, what do I do? And so I just decided, I'm like, I got to go all in on this then. I got to start getting clients. Like I just have to do this. And it's not, and I was making okay money with my other sites. Like it was fine, but that was never really my intention with those. My intention was to build an SEO business. And so I just, when your back's kind of up against the wall, you tend to really do things. It's pretty crazy what happens. So I just started going on Craigslist. I would respond to gigs every single day. I would just set a target. I'm going to respond to 10, 20 gigs, as many as I can. And then I started getting clients from Craigslist like crazy. Like it's such weird thinking back then that was happening, but I was literally getting clients from Craigslist. And then I would respond to questions on Quora. I got clients from doing that. People would reach out to me. Hey, I saw your response on Quora and, got my first couple clients from doing that. And then at the same time, I was building up an actual SEO foundation, which you kind of mentioned here is, my brand, Gotch SEO. I was building that up, but I was more focused on ranking for local based keywords. So that would be like Santa Monica SEO company, because I was still in LA when I started thinking about that. Funny thing is, if you look up Santa Monica SEO company, I'm still there. So that was in 2014. I made that page. And it's funny on the page, I'm like, hey, by the way, I'm not in Santa Monica. I'm actually in St. Louis, but I created this page just to prove that I'm good at this. So it's like literally the copy. Yeah. So I have that page and then I really focused in on St. Louis. And I just wanted to become like the go-to guy in St. Louis for SEO. And so to this day, I still rank for St. Louis SEO and keywords that are related to that. And that ended up becoming really the vehicle of almost all of my business, was just straight SEO, ironically. So yeah, that was kind of how I transitioned into this. So
it's a perfect transition into today because, ranking in general is hard. Ranking for different keywords is hard. We talk to people every week here on the podcast who are trying to and succeeding at ranking for different things, but ranking for SEO content is, in theory, the hardest because you're up against the best of the best. You're up against the ones who know what they're doing, right? A lot of times you can win in the SERPs because you know how to rank better than all the competitors. But in SEO, in other words, in ranking for SEO content, more than likely that's not the case. As soon as an untapped keyword gets discovered, it's probably going to be swooped down upon and so forth and so on. Let's talk today about where your agency and your online website is at, just to give people a framework. And I have a lot of questions that we can spin into after that.
Yeah, so my business is very different now than it was when I was in the early stages. So from like 2013 to 2016, I was all agency. Like I only did client work. I didn't do anything else. And I learned a lot in that process. But in 2016, I realized I'm like, all right, I don't think I can do client work forever. Like I just made that kind of conclusion. I'm like, I just don't think I can do this for the rest of my life. So I was like, what else could I do? And that's when I decided like, I'm going to create a training course, some sort of course that I knew that was a good way to diversify your revenue streams. So I did that. That was when I launched the first version of Gotch SEO Academy, was in 2016. And it was a terrible thing. And I was so deathly afraid of being on video. I just talked to someone the other day about this, but just so people know, like I was so afraid to be on video that I wrote out all of my lessons. Like I wrote them text version and I put them into a platform, and like that was the course. So basically you're paying for like a glorified database of articles. Yes,
An
essentially.
ebook with an awkward talking head.
Yes, correct. So there was no video, and like it was just bad. Yeah. So anyway, I after that I was like, okay, I got to get over myself. I got to get on video. I got to get over my fear. So then I did that, but I took baby steps. I didn't go to like recording like this, like talking head. I just went into recording my screen. So I just would go through the process. Okay, here's how you do an audit with Screaming Frog, and here's how you fund. I would go through the process. My delivery is not what it is today. It was very awkward. It was very fragmented. It was different, right? It just wasn't. I've progressed a lot since then. But that's because I've recorded hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos since then. And it's crazy what happens is if you want to get better at something, the more you do it, usually you get a little bit better at it. It's a pretty crazy thing that happens, I've noticed. So anyway, that was kind of, leading up to today. Basically, the way my business is structured is it's heavily my academy. My academy is like the biggest part of my business now, just overtaken everything. And I still do client work to stay, keep my hands dirty. But for me, like I'm doing SEO with my own projects. I'm always doing SEO just in general. So I'm always in the weeds. I'm always in the dirt. And I have to be, right? I have to be in the dirt to be able to deliver the value for my students in the academy. So these days it's really focused on the academy. And as far as my brand, my brand is just content, right? That's what I do. I try to give so many results in advance that people say, okay, that really helped me. And I think he could probably help me more if I found out his full process. Right. So for me, I just use the Frank Kern model, give results in advance and then people want to work with you. That's what I try to do. And like whenever I feel stuck in my business, I'm like, something doesn't feel right. I always go back to that. I'm like, okay, well, I'm probably not giving enough results in advance. So then I start thinking about how can I create content that is just purely designed to help people, right? If they make it to the end of my video, the 10-minute video at the end, I might say, hey, by the way, I have an SEO training program. But that's, 0.001% of what I give, right? So for me, it's all about content, right? That's literally all I do. I just create content. I try to build, try to get people to know, like, and trust me. So then when they come into my world, we're not having to sell them. There's no sales. It's just, hey, I know Nathan knows how to do this based on what he's already given me, and I would like to enroll. That's the goal, right? So,
well, you say you're in the dirt. If I were, say, knowledgeable about SEO, if I did SEO on my side project, but what would be something that you would share with me that I would be a little bit surprised to hear about SEO that kind of comes from you kind of being on the ground, being in the dirt, rolling around in the mud?
Oh man, so many. So what part do we want to focus on? I mean, there's so much there.
I'm here all day. I got my cup of coffee.
I mean,
you tell me which way you want to go. Yeah, it's open ended on purpose, though, and I mean, If you're in the dirt, like, let's get dirty.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, my mind just goes to the process, right? And I think about all the components of the process. So for me, like, it's more for like I think about where are the missteps in strategy? Where are the missteps in process? And so I know your audience is more kind of building niche sites, building authority sites. So we'll all kind of tailor what I'm about to say towards that. So like if you're building a content site and your objective is to monetize it through display or affiliate, maybe drop shipping, whatever it is. Let's just assume you don't have a product. Like let's assume you're just going to do it through it's a display or affiliate. Well, one thing I see is, there's a lot of different opinions out there, right, about how to content strategy. But for me, believe it or not, like when it comes to keyword research, okay, my strategy is actually pretty much the same no matter the type of business. Okay, so whether it's a business that doesn't even sell a product and it's let's say an authority site, or a business that's a SaaS company and they actually have a product to sell, right? It's the same because for me, what I'm thinking about is what are the most valuable keywords in this industry, right? I'm thinking about that. So what are those money keywords, as people like to say, right? And so for me, what I'm thinking about is like, okay, if we're going to build this keyword database, I want to start down here at the bottom of the funnel, right? I want to start with the keywords that I know are extremely lucrative. And then I want to build my whole strategy around improving those. And what people tend to do, a misstep, is they enter an industry. Let's say it's under counter ice makers. Let's choose something a pretty horrible, boring industry. Okay,
we reference a lot of analogies here. That's a new one, so good. We'll roll with that one. I'm trying to get a visual right now for a very specific product that's as boring as ever.
Yes, so I'm going as boring as possible so we can get a good example. So under counter ice maker. All right, so to look at transactional keywords and for under counter ice makers, the smartest thing to do is to go to Amazon and find the products that are being sold, right? If you're going to do affiliate. So for me, I'd be thinking about, okay, what are the affiliate driven pages that I can create first, right? I want to build those first. And people will say, well, but what about the ratio between it? Nonsense. There's no proof that that's actually a thing. There's no proof that there's some sort of magical ratio that Google's going to say, oh, it's 80% informational and 20% commercial. And no, it just isn't a thing. That's just made up by SEOs who are creating things. But at the end of the day, we want to focus on the keywords that are going to drive the actual revenue. And the worst thing that you can do is build your whole strategy around traffic. A lot of people get so obsessed. They go into Ahrefs and they say, "Ooh, okay, look, there's a under counter ice maker memes. That looks like a great keyword. It gets 50,000 searches a month, right? Oh man, that's gonna juice it." And you have to remember that it's low competition for a reason. Yep. Number one, and number two, it's not going to bring the right traffic into your website. And traffic is all relative. It is just a number, right? And so I always like to use the example, like you could take that example of under counter ice maker memes or puns or some ridiculous keyword. I'm not saying they don't have any value, but just as far as comparing them, you take that keyword, which gets 50,000 searches a month, isn't super competitive, could drive you a ton of traffic, versus St. Louis car accident lawyer that gets 100 searches a month, okay? When you compare the value of those keywords, it's astronomically different, right? So like one person who converts out of that 100 searches for a car accident lawyer could be worth 10,000, 50,000, potentially even $1 million in some cases, right? So, and the equivalent of traffic that's from low quality keywords, you would need an ungodly amount of traffic just to match that same, type of value, right? So for me, I really don't think about traffic. I think about how can I dominate this industry from the bottom and work my way up. So I don't go up. Like if I find a keyword, let's say it's, I don't know the name of under counter ice makers at this point, but let's say it's blue under counter ice makers, right? Okay. Like blue diamond under counter ice makers. Right. So I would build my core asset, like my review. Now, personally, this is just a kind of a philosophical thing. If I'm building a site, I am not going to go and build a site where I can't actually try the product or have someone who has some sort of firsthand experience with that product. So like in the case of under counter ice makers, they're very high ticket, right? So I can't just go to Amazon and purchase like 20 of them, right? Like that's a real problem. There's like
installation. You have to install it. You have to, you can't just plug it in and use it.
No. So there's issues with that as far as what I would do as far as niche selection. I wouldn't pick that unless I had someone who was some sort of geek about under counter ice makers that I could partner with and they could become the subject matter expert and I could dictate the SEO strategy, right? And I think a lot of people like neglect that. They're like, because I think sometimes we get so wrapped up on how much money we're going to make and we forget that like if you go 50-50 with someone, you could have that subject matter expert who is really the geek who for some unknown reason loves under counter ice makers. Like let them do the strat, like let them do the content and you just help, facilitate the strategy.
To that point, a plumber who, spends his days installing these different things and actually knows a lot about the ergonomics of it, but has no interest in starting a website about it because that's not his skill set or her skill set.
Exactly. So there's a lot of value in thinking in that way. Like, who's someone I could partner with, right? To be that person. And there's a lot of people who will do it. Like, you'd be surprised. So for me, I think about the keyword side a lot because keywords are everything. And I think I see so many people, they invest all this effort into these informational keywords that just are not going to produce anything, right? And I know there's the whole theory going around like, oh, well, we got to build topic authority, right? That's so important. And I agree with that, by the way. I agree about building topic authority. But I think the way that people approach it, like, okay, I'm just going to blanket every topic and not even consider the quality of that content, not consider the intent of that, not considering how that operates within the funnel structure, just creating random stuff as a way to build topic authority is not what I personally do. What I like to do is I like to build topic authority at a really granular level. So for example, let's say on my website, I'm targeting keyword research services. Okay. It's a investigative intent based keyword, right? So someone searching that, they don't really know who they're going to work with. They haven't made a decision yet. They're looking for brands. They're trying to get an idea. So you're going to find a lot of list posts in this case. And so the objective of that content is show them who the vendors are, the best vendors for that, that particular service. So I actually have a post that I did on this on Gotch SEO where I actually went and I purchased 11 different keyword research services. Like, I literally went Fiverr, Upwork, ones on Google, like all of them. And I created this case study about the different ones, and I did the top 3. So that particular example, the reason I'm bringing it up is because when I started to look at that page and how it was performing, it had dropped some spots, and I was like, ooh, I wonder why it dropped. And when I did my investigation, I discovered that on my site, I don't talk about keyword research at all. Like, that is the only page that talks about keyword research. So yes, keyword research is relevant within the broader context of SEO. Yes, it is relevant on that front, but that's still a far gap between SEO and keyword research services. There's a lot of stuff that goes on by the time you get to keyword research services, right? So the way that I can build topic authority in that isolated scenario is thinking about what are some of the supporting ideas I can build around keyword research services, right? So obviously, how to do keyword research for SEO, right? Something more informational in nature. What are the best keyword research tools, right? That's another thing that I should dig into. And then on top of it, I can start to get real granular and start to have dedicated review pages specific to the vendors that offer keyword research services, the types of tools that are offered, have dedicated pages for each of those. And you start to peel that onion, right? And there's so much opportunity just on one little isolated cluster. So for me, that's why I love to focus on, I find that keyword or that page that it's really been built, and then think about how can I build around that, right? And that's where I go. I get really granular. So we can dig into a lot of different stuff, but that's kind of where my mind goes personally. So
several questions that come out of that. Let's start with the idea of focusing on keywords to target, not by search volume. Not all keywords are created the same. Just because it has high search volume doesn't mean it's going to have the business impact. And also not targeting by competitiveness. You kind of said, hey, low competition keywords, that's one thing. But you start by focusing on the keywords that have the most revenue potential. You just briefly mentioned going to Amazon, but how would someone actually research that? How would someone actually get into the details of going hey, let's say I'm making a website about under cabinet ice makers. How do I know which ones do generate the most money?
Yes, very good question. So for me, when my keyword research process, and I'm speaking in the context of working with clients, right? So when I have a client come to me or a campaign that I'm starting, there's really only 2 scenarios when it comes to keyword research. Number one, they have existing keywords, which means they have keywords that are already ranking from position 1 to 100. Okay. There's stuff that already exists. The other option is, like you mentioned, completely fresh, brand new. They don't rank for anything. Okay. So the reason I bring that up is because it really does dictate kind of how the flow of the keyword research will go. And so I'll touch on the existing first. So like, let's say you, cause I know you'll have some people listening to this that have websites already. They're already got some stuff cooking. So what I would do in that example is I focus in on the existing keywords first before I even think about going after new keywords. And the reason for that is because what happens is most websites are already sitting on a gold mine of opportunity, right? So from keywords from positions 2 to 15, like I love those keywords. Those are the best keywords, okay? Because what I do is I go, okay, beautiful. We've got a keyword here that's ranking number 2, okay? I know statistically by most studies that if we go from number 2 to number 1, that's 100% increase in clicks. Because roughly most studies say it's roughly 30% CTR at position 1, 15% CTR at position 2, and then it's like 9, and then progressively gets worse, right? So people don't realize like going one position is 100% more clicks. Like that's a huge amount of difference. So for me, I live there. I don't go anywhere else until I get all that squared away, right? And there's so much opportunity to improve. And usually the funny thing is the levers that you have to pull to go from number 2 to number 1 aren't that big usually. Sometimes it's just some slight adjustments on the page itself. Sometimes you will have to build some more topic support around that idea, like I mentioned. Other times it's just acquiring more links to that page. And then there's a variety of levers, but it's much easier than building an entire brand new page from scratch. And I see so many SEO campaigns, they start and they're like, okay, so what are going to be the 100 new assets we're going to create? I'm like, 100 new assets? We're already sitting on money right now. We don't need to create any new assets. We need to focus in on what we have here. So for me, that's why I always start there, because the opportunity is so huge as far as increasing traffic, right? I haven't mentioned obviously how I select keywords, and I'll talk about that in a second, right? Because there's a lot that goes into that, how I decide what keywords to go after. But as far as like kind of putting these keywords into buckets, low-hanging fruits 2 to 15, keywords from 16 to 50, I call just existing keywords. Also very valuable bucket of keywords that you know, typically if they're in say page 2 or 3, usually there's a lack of authority. There's some sort of thing that's holding it back, right? Now, this is one of my favorite parts, which a lot of people don't talk about, is actually positions 50 to 100. Now, most people see those and like, oh, those, not even going to spend my time with those, waste of time. Believe it or not, there's so much opportunity in that section. And what I do is, so like, let's say keyword research services, you continue with that example, okay? Let's say that keyword's ranking number 3 for me. That page is ranking number 3 for that keyword. But then I go to the number 67, and there's some keyword that's not even close as far as relevance to that core idea. But what happens is Google is telling me that there is some relevance there, right? Because that page would not be ranking if there wasn't some type of relevance. So Google's actually revealing a lot to me, and I'm saying, I see. There's something relevant here, which means in my eyes, if the intent is a mismatch, right? So if it's keyword research versus, let's say keyword research tools, that's an intent mismatch. I know Google has now told me, it's not like Google called me up and told me, but the algorithm has told me, yes, that would be great. But the algorithm has told me that I need to create a dedicated asset to support that keyword. So I call those clustering opportunities, because what happens is you find all these opportunities that now can build support around the first idea that we were talking about, right? So that's why I obsess about these existing keywords, because there's so much you can do just with that alone. And then, as we mentioned before, as far as a new website, it's honestly pretty easy as far as how you build that initial keyword database. Doesn't matter which tool you prefer, whether it's Ahrefs or SEMrush. It's just a matter of preference, right? So for me, I use Ahrefs. It's not because I believe that Ahrefs is like superior to SEMrush in any way. I think they're pretty apples to apples. But it's more just because it's what I've used for so long, right? I've just used it for a very long time, and maybe I'm resistant to change. I don't know, but I'm just used to using it. So for me, what I do when I'm building a new database is in the case of Ahrefs, I just go right into the Keyword Explorer and I start really broad. Okay, so if it's, let's say SEO, because it's just the easiest thing to talk about right now, I would just put SEO in there. Okay. Just put SEO very broadly. And then I'm going to look, and I'm actually not going to look at the keywords. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and look at the websites that have captured the most traffic as a whole in this particular vertical. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go there and I'm going to start to extract their ideas from what they've already ranked for. And so that's where I like to begin. Now, as far as like building that's kind of phase one, is building the database, right? You're building the database of keywords. You're not too concerned about qualification or prioritization of those keywords at that point. I don't recommend getting into it at that early of a stage. I recommend just building a big database, and then we get into the process of narrowing that down. Now that's where the magic happens. So I don't know how much time we can have here, but that's where the real fun happens, because for me, it's going to be very dependent on the business model. So like if it's a let's say it's a SaaS company that sells their own product, what I do is I use two mechanisms. These are the most important mechanisms in the process. So number one is intent. So what is the intent of that keyword? So there's a lot of debate on the different types of intent, and I agree. There's many different versions of intent, but at a high level, there's basically only a couple categories of intent, right? So at the top, we have informational intent. What is SEO? Okay, very, very obvious. What is SEO? Then we go deeper down it. Now we're into, you could argue is more investigative intent. Okay, that might be like best SEO tools. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, starting to get kind of deeper into that funnel. Next one we could argue would be maybe in that comparison intent category. So because when someone has ended up on best SEO tools, what they're going to discover is now they're brand aware. So they're aware that there's Ahrefs. They're aware that there's SEMrush. They're aware that there's Longtail Pro, which I know Spencer. So the different options, and what that will lead them into a search that might be like SEMrush versus Ahrefs, right? So now they're in a comparison. It doesn't mean that they're ready to buy yet. It just means that now they're in the comparison stage. And then finally, let's say they like SEMrush, they search SEMrush coupon code, right? Or maybe they might do SEMrush review next, and then maybe SEMrush coupon code. Now, at this point, it's pretty much a done deal, right? So for me, the reason that I think about that is because I want to prioritize SEMrush coupon code much higher than I want to prioritize what is SEO. It's not that what is SEO is a bad keyword. It's just that where are my priorities going to be, right? And it doesn't make sense to go after these broad informational queries if we haven't handled the other parts of the funnel yet where the money is made. So for me, in my process, I assign a point score to intent. So if it's transactional, it gets a higher score. If it's informational, it gets a lower score. That's kind of phase one. Phase two is looking at the relevance of the keyword, okay? And also going back to the context of like if you're running an affiliate site, you would assign a higher score to something that's more investigative in nature, right? Or something that's more transactional in nature. So like, best baseball cleats, okay? That's going to get a higher score than just what are baseball cleats, right? Because naturally that one has a higher probability of actually producing income. So then the next one is relevance, okay? And this is really important. Like I used to really just basically focus on intent and a few other metrics, but then I added this relevance component. And this is important because you want to know what the relevance of that keyword is to what your core offer is, right? So obviously it's easy when you sell a product. You can basically say like, I sell SEO training, so anything that's related to SEO training gets a high score, right? I need to be ranking for that stuff. But if it's like best SEO tools, okay, it's in the same like world, but it's not like someone's not going to search best SEO tools and sign up for my training, right? That's a far gap. That's a far bridge to cross to get there. So it gets a lower score. If someone searches what is SEO, they're way too far in the journey to end up to buy my big investment SEO program, right? So having those two mechanisms in place will help you really identify the keywords that are really valuable, right? So those are really important. And then outside of that, then you want to start to get into the more quantifiable data points. Obviously, looking at the search volume is a good thing to look at. Looking at the KD is another thing we want to look at, right? Which is the overall, how competitive it is as far as links hitting the competitor pages that are ranking specifically. Next one would be looking at the overall strength of the domains that are ranking for that keyword, which is another thing you can look at in Ahrefs as well. I like to look at both those mechanisms. And going back to what we talked about earlier, like missteps, that's a huge misstep I see very often. People will see, oh, wow, it's got 0 KD. This looks awesome. I'm going to go after it. And they neglect the fact that every single website that's ranking has a DR90. Okay, so that's not good because you can't overcome that.
But it didn't need many backlinks to rank as a DR90.
Right, exactly. So that's looking at authority is really important, like so important. Like if I basically when I'm trying to identify a keyword, I want to see weaknesses in the SERP. Okay, so a weakness in the SERP would be looking at seeing sites that are of similar authority of the site that we're trying to rank, right? So like if our site's a DR20, I want to see other DR20s, DR30s in there. If I don't see any of that and it's all DR60 and above, I'm going to be like, this is going to be tough. Like we're going to have to really have the best page with the most links going to it to really make a dent here. And it's going to be a much bigger investment to make that dent, right? So for me, it's not just a matter of like, what's the best keyword? It's also a matter of like resource allocation too. Because links are a big cost, right? They're a big investment, and also depending on how competitive it is. And the other part is on the content side too. So if I analyze the top 10 results and I see like everyone's a killer, right? Everyone's got subject matter expertise. Everyone's got extreme nuance as far as their content. They've got it going, right? We're talking A+ type of content with A+ level players. I'm gonna be like, yikes, this is gonna be tough, right? And so that's what I'm looking at is like these different variables. And then eventually by the end of this, I have a score calculated based on all those variables. And then I can say, okay, these are the best keywords, right? But I've looked at each of those variables. The other one I will look at too, by the way, is a cost per click as well. And I do like cost per click just because it does signal transactional value. So that's also gives me ability to filter even further. So might seem pretty psychotic, my process, but I'm telling you, the reason I'm so crazy about it is that I've made so many mistakes, right? I've wasted my time and effort and money on keywords that just didn't do anything. All they did was juice my charts, right? My charts look nice, but my revenue stayed the same. And I just don't play those games anymore. So anyway, I know there's a lot to unpack there, but yeah.
I want to take a quick break from the episode to let the founder of Rank IQ, our sponsor, share a cool tactic bloggers are using to get big Google traffic gains.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm a blogger just like you. I also host the Blogging Millionaire podcast and have taken 3 blogs in different niches from 0 to 1 million monthly sessions. Bloggers like Megan Porta, who is the host of the Eat Blog Talk podcast, are using RankIQ's keyword library to target low competition keywords to write the majority of their new post on. 2 years ago, when Megan started using RankIQ, her blog's Google traffic had plateaued at around 30,000 monthly sessions. Megan's monthly sessions have steadily increased over the past 2 years of using RankIQ, and today, her blog is getting close to 200,000 monthly sessions from Google Organic Search. RankIQ's keyword library has a list of the lowest competition, high traffic keyword phrases in every major and minor niche. For example, the food niche library has over 120,000 unique low competition phrases. And those 120,000 are separated into 100 sub-niches like meal prep, air fryer, and baked desserts. All of the keywords in our library have been handpicked by a team of keyword research experts. We are the only keyword tool that does the research for you. This can save you up to 100 hours of doing the keyword research yourself, and it removes the large margin of error that the do-it-yourself keyword tools have, so that every post you write will be able to compete for a top 10 ranking in Google. While I could continue to talk about the benefits, I think the 1-year study I mentioned at the beginning of the episode that found Mediavine bloggers using RankIQ ended up with an increase of 4.68 times the monthly Google traffic of the Mediavine bloggers not using RankIQ tells the story much better than any benefit can.
If you would like to get access to the lowest competition, high traffic keywords in your niche, then go on over to rankiq.com to set up your RankIQ account today. Well, I have a couple nuanced questions for you. So let me dive into some of these.
Sure.
'Cause I think there's some value if I could get some more detail for everyone listening about some of these
Sure.
things here. So going back, you talked about looking at competitors, or you talked about looking at the big players in a space, right? And this would apply if you already have a site that's targeting things, you already have content, or even if you're just looking at maybe validating the space. But you talked about going and looking at the big players in the space and extracting what they're writing about and what they're ranking for. Can you dive a little bit deeper into that? Because I think that can be difficult sometimes. You go look at all the keywords they rank for, but that doesn't necessarily tell you what topics to target. You go look at all the pages they rank for, but that doesn't necessarily tell you what things are important to target first. So how are you extracting the value that each individual player is bringing to the table in a niche of sorts?
Yeah. So for me, I really want to find the websites that are hyper niche focused, right? I don't want to find the site that's like, they just happen to talk about SEO, or they just happen to talk about under counter ice makers. I want to see that like insane deep level expertise from that site. Like all they do is talk about under counter ice makers. Like, and sometimes those aren't the most authoritative sites. Sometimes those sites aren't, but they are extremely deep as far as content. And you know that they've hit every little nook and cranny of that industry. And so those are where I try to find like who those are. Like I'm not looking at Huffington Post. I'm not looking at I'm not even looking at Amazon, right? Like I don't care about any of those. I want to find that guy who's obsessed about keyword, or, about under counter ice makers. So it is dependent on if you already have an existing site. So like if your site's brand new and you have no keywords, doing like a keyword gap analysis is kind of pointless because every keyword is going to be an opportunity, right?
Everything.
So yeah. So, but if you do have a site that you've already got a little bit of traction, you've already ranking for some stuff in your industry, then doing a keyword gap analysis with Ahrefs or SEMrush is very smart, right? So you go and find those, let's say 2 to 3 competitors that I kind of fit into the bucket that I described. You run them through the keyword gap, and then you can see that huge gap that you have between you and them, right? Now, as I mentioned before, it's easy to find keywords. Anyone can do it. Anyone can go in Ahrefs or whatever, and you can find keywords. That's not where the magic happens. The magic happens in knowing what keywords to go after. So, so for me, it's, like I mentioned, my strategy is always to prioritize, as I mentioned before, the keywords that are going to produce some sort of transactional value. And it's super variable. Like in the case of, baseball cleats, like I'm going to be just looking for every possible, every type of investigative idea that I could go after in relation to baseball cleats. Like if my site was, bestbaseballcleats.com, then I want to really start to build like, okay, I should probably have a list post about the best baseball cleats for youth players, best baseball cleats for college players, best baseball cleats for men's softball leagues, right? Like start to get into the different ideal clients, right? Starting to think about what those look like, because it's always different segments. It could be for seniors, it could be for youth, it could be best blue baseball cleats. It could be based on a certain feature, right? So if the intent is different, we want to be building out separate assets to support the different intent. And so for me, that's where I would go, starting to think about like, what does that look like? And sometimes it's not even using the keyword research tools. Like that's a good place to start. It gives you tons of ideas, but sometimes actually going into like ChatGPT, for example, and just saying like, what are the topics related to best baseball cleats? Like what are the types of people that buy baseball cleats, right? And just start to see what those people look like. Because we're not creating content for Google. We're creating content for people. And I think sometimes it gets lost in the mix, right? Like our goal is to get people to buy stuff. Our goal is not to get people to just, like, we just don't want traffic. Like traffic doesn't mean anything. Like I want to make money. That's kind of the goal of this. So, so I think about the people that will be coming to my site, and have I fulfilled their needs? Have I answered all their questions? Have I filled in all those gaps? And the answer is, in most industries, you'll never fill in every gap. It's impossible. It's just not going to happen. There's too much. Like, because when you really start getting into it, like even in the SEO space, I could probably create like 100 pages just about keyword research that all would have different intent. I mean, it's never ending, right? So, there is no necessarily end goal to this game. It's an ongoing game forever, but I think it's important that you figure out what's that core thing that you're trying to promote, whether that's your own product, whether that's an affiliate offer. The only exception I'll say is with display, right? Display can be a little tricky because you're not really usually it is a traffic game with display. But even then, even with display, you make more money when you target good keywords, right? Because the advertisers pay more for those keywords, right? So anyway, we can go in whatever direction you want, but that's kind of the way I think about it.
Well, I want to spend the last part of the interview, and let me make a big jump and assume we've now chosen all the right keywords and prioritized them all correctly. Big jump, but there's a lot there that people can go back and deep dive into. I've already got a page of notes, and I'm just the host, and my notes are just focused on what questions to ask you. So there's a lot there, but let's assume we've done that and move into content. Because again, going back to what you were saying, if you're rolling around in the dirt, what's the dirt these days? What are you seeing that makes for good content? Because, you can say, and everyone does say it, publish good content. Google wants good content. Google more and more wants good content. And I hear you say things like, I want to just call it out, like earlier you said, go back and update content before you make new content. I think a lot of people, to be fair, think that updating old content is harder than producing new content. And to hear you say that, I just want to get your insights. What's good content? Why is it so hard to produce and so expensive to produce? And what is moving the needle today in terms of on-the-ground experience?
Yeah. So I love this question because, I get it. I get this a lot. In my training or in my content, I'll get the comments. Someone says, I've been creating amazing content and I'm not getting the results. And the problem is it's very difficult, number one, to judge your own content, right? Everyone thinks their content's the best. Everyone thinks their child's the cutest. Everyone thinks their child's the smartest. It's just the way we're conditioned. Okay. So for me, what I don't try to look at, I don't subjectively look at my content in that regard. What I do is I look at what the market is doing with my content. Okay. And for Google, it's the same way. Google's I'm not going to get into this, but there's a lot of propaganda. Let's just say that much. Okay. They say a lot of things because they know it's going to scare people and they know it's going to, their biggest weapon is not their algorithm. Their biggest weapon is what they put out in the market and claim that they're doing, because people are so knee-jerk reaction to everything. Oh, Google EAT. Okay, now I got to do now, funny thing is that whole PR initiative by them, everyone now is focused on creating subject matter level content, right? Subject matter expertise. Did they program it into the algorithm? No, it's not even in the algorithm. It's just a guideline. So, but what they've done is they elevated everyone's game just by basically scaring them. It's the same way with helpful content, right? It's this helpful content update. It's the same exact thing, because when you look at that, they want you to create helpful content. Okay. How does an algorithm determine what's helpful? That's a very weird standard. It's a very vague standard to know what's truly helpful. There's what's helpful to you may not be helpful to me. We could be reading the same thing and I'd say, yeah, this is awesome. You'd be like, no, this is terrible. Opinions are very variable. It's crazy how different they are. So the way that Google, though, can measure what's helpful is looking at external signals, right? And so links to this day will continue to be what determines what's helpful. That's it. If a page has a lot of links, it has a lot of votes from high quality sources that are relevant in the industry, that signals to Google that content is helpful. It's literally as simple as that. And if you don't have those signals, then you're going to be playing the volatility game all the time. So when an update comes, you're going to be constantly bouncing back and forth. Your traffic's going to drop overnight. And what happens with authority sites during algorithm updates? Nothing.
They go up.
Nothing happens to them. Usually they get better. They usually get more traffic, they occupy more keywords, and then all the little small sites get all the damage, right? And so it's not because they're producing more helpful content. It's not because they're, objectively their content is better than maybe a smaller site. It's just because the signals that Google uses haven't really changed much, right? And the signals that continue to be the most important are high quality, relevant backlinks. So not to go off on a tangent on that front, I just think it's important though to mention like what variables really seem to matter long term. Now, with that said, as far as actually creating the content, I view my content strategy using the 80-20 rule. So 80% of my content should be built around some type of keyword phrase, okay? Some sort of searchable phrase, 80%. The other 20% is what I would call my riskier assets, okay? So those 20, and it's not risky like as far as getting penalized, it's more risky as far as will it be effective, right? It's more of a marketing strategy. Yes. So one of in that bucket is going to be link bait. Okay. Link bait is tricky because it's not always going to work, right? You got to put a lot of lines out there to see which one's going to kind of pick up. Sometimes it's data driven stuff. Sometimes it's free tools. Other times it's, could be some sort of ego bait. Like I'm trying a lot of different content frameworks to try to see if I can get some links in. And so that's kind of most of that 20% bucket. The other percentage, I'd say maybe let's say 5 to 10% will be what I would consider experimental keywords. And so those are keywords that no one is going after at this current moment, but they're trending upward, right? So the way to find those keywords is you can use a tool like Exploding Topics, which is by Brian Dean, which is a very, very good tool, but obviously requires an investment. If you can afford it, definitely a good idea. But the other option is actually to live in your vertical, like actually be a part of the vertical. So like being on TikTok, being on Reddit, being on Quora, because what happens is whenever we see data in Ahrefs or SEMrush or even Google, the Google Keyword Planner, we're looking at history. That is old. That is old data. It is not new. It's outdated by the time we get it. And so with TikTok though, like my favorite example, okay, in 2020 when we were all locked down, okay, there was a TikTok trend that was, I forgot the name of it, but it was like this weird coffee. You'd get like instant coffee and you'd make this like weird concoction. So because I know how this works, right, it was going absolutely viral on TikTok. And I was like, all right, watch. And I was telling my wife, I'm like, watch this. I'll go and search this. I'll use a keyword planner. I'll show you. And she's like, well, I don't even care about this. Why are you showing me this? But anyway, I showed her. It had zero search volume in Google. That's impossible. There's no way that this extremely viral idea has zero search volume. So of course, the websites that got ahead of that trend and they put pages out, they reaped all the benefits, right? Because there's no competition. It's trending upward. Now, is it a fad? Yes, right? You're probably going to fall off the map once it dies down. But it'd be like the equivalent if you had already put up a ChatGPT asset, right? That was the definitive guide to ChatGPT before ChatGPT launched, right? Like you would have reaped all the rewards, okay? And so that's why but once again, that's why it's in the experimental bucket, because there's a lot of volatility on that strategy. You can't just rely on trend jacking as a strategy. It needs to be a small piece of the pie, but it's still a piece, right? It's still important. So like, and just give you one more example in the context of my business, okay? I just put out a video on YouTube. It was about the helpful content update, okay? When that update came out, the day it came out, I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to invest all my time now in creating a video as soon as possible, because I know people are going to start searching for it. People are going to start being interested in it. And of course, that's not most of my content. That's only like 1% of my content. But if I see an opportunity, and if you guys see an opportunity, you should jump on it fast, because you are the one that will reap the rewards. Whoever moves the fastest, you don't even have to have the best content or the best video. Just because you moved first, you get all the benefit. Eventually, you'll probably get pushed off, by the way. Like once the big authority sites see that there's volume, because remember, they're looking at old data. Once they see the volume, they're like, let's go after this one. Then you're going to get crushed. Yes, that will happen, but it won't matter because you've already gotten most of the ROI. So that's the experimental bucket. That's the way I like to think about it. But I think it's so critical that every SEO asset that you create has some sort of linkable components in it. Like always thinking about what can I put in this content that's going to make it linkable, right? And so there are certain assets just that will never get links or don't even deserve links. Like for example, the best baseball cleats, like a list post about best baseball cleats. It's not a super linkable asset, right? You can make it linkable if you use a more experimental strategy where you actually go and buy all the baseball cleats and you actually test all the baseball cleats and you have like a controlled environment where you test them all. That becomes linkable. So like if you look at ratings or rtings.com, if you want to go and look at them, my favorite example, okay? They do it the right way. They do it the expensive way, right? They invest in their content majorly, but they literally go and buy TVs and they put them in a controlled environment and they actually test those TVs and then they create their list post. Here's the best TVs based on facts, not based on, I read some stuff on an Amazon review, right? So that's where things can become linkable. So technically even investigative content can be linkable because people want to reference it. Oh, hey, Joe, he actually tested those baseball cleats and here's the reference data from when he tested those. So for me, when I'm thinking about, I was like, what are the little mechanisms I can add into the content that makes it just better, right? That's all I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to make it better, more linkable, more shareable. And I'm not just thinking about how can I use ChatGPT to create 5,000 assets in 24 hours? Like that's not where my mind goes. I think about how can I create the absolute best the best page for this keyword. And one important nuance on that is that you're not trying to create the best page that's ever existed, right? That's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to create the best page that's ever existed for that keyword. That's it. It's all relative. So anyway, yeah, I could talk all day about content, but yeah, that's where my mind goes.
Well, I think it's a good way for us to kind of wrap things up, bring it all back. And I do hear a thread coming out of you, whether we talked about niche selection, keyword research, creating content, creating linkable assets for link building. And it's just that not that it's impossible or not that it's not possible to do all this in a niche that you're not already embedded in, but it's sure, you just keep hitting on it with everything you're talking about. It sure seems like it's so much easier to get a competitive advantage when it's a niche that you are embedded in, involved in, excited about, maybe even already doing as a passion or a hobby or a career or a side hustle. Maybe just as we wrap up, give me 3 or 4 minutes of commentary on that as I've kind of listened to you for the last hour or so.
Yeah, I mean, I think back in the day, you could just kind of pick whatever niche you wanted and create an affiliate site and it would do fine. I did that. Like it worked fine. But I think these days, just because of Google's EEAT guidelines, because of the depth of content that you really need to beat competitors, and also to attract links as well, it's just so hard to not have some sort of at least enthusiasm about what you're creating it around or some sort of expertise. You can have either or. And this is why Google added the extra E, right? Because Google realized that it's not always just about expertise. Like for example, you could take like, let's say fat loss, right? How do you determine expertise for someone that can give advice about fat loss? Okay, well, you could look at credentials, hard credentials, like do they have a degree in nutrition, they have all the credentials. But what about a person who has no degree, but they've helped 1,000 people lose 100 pounds? Mm-hmm. Who's the expert? The guy that's actually done it or the guy that read about it? Mm-hmm. That's where it gets tricky. So that's why Google added experience in there, right? Because now it can satisfy that person clearly has subject matter expertise. They have experience, they have firsthand experience in the field. So now it's actually legit, right? So, and you can see that through and obviously there's some industries where it's like hard and fast, like credentials, right? There's no other option. Like if you're going to do, I don't know, something super intense, like personal injury law, you're going to have to be a personal injury lawyer. I don't really know how you're going to get around that. But for a lot of, I'd say most other industries, it's pretty open to interpretation what determines expertise. But the way to get there is like, you do need to like what you're doing. Just from a pure like motivation perspective, it's so hard to work on something you don't even care about. Like when I was working on the Undercounter Ice Maker site, like I hated that site. I just despised it. Every time I would have
getting up out of bed in the morning to talk about the newest and latest and greatest in ice cube formation wasn't
right.
doing it for you?
No, it wasn't doing it for me. So I like, it was a struggle. It took all my effort in the world. But guess what? When I had to write something about SEO, zero effort for me to do that. Yeah. Zero effort for me to come on here and talk about SEO. Do I need motivation? No, I don't need any motivation because this is what I do. This is what I love. It's much easier to do things that you like, right? So I think if you're trying to pick a niche, you're trying to pick, and you also need to have a long-term vision as well. Like, I think you don't want to get it wrapped up in the idea that like, oh, I'm going to start a niche site and I'm going to be rich in a year. Like, just not a good perspective to build from. I think it's better to think about, okay, I'm not just going to build a niche site. I'm going to build a business. I'm going to build a brand in this vertical. And when you start to think like that, that will change the way that you approach things. You're not just going to be like, I'm just going to pop open ChatGPT and blast this site with all this like, you're not going to think like that. You're going to think more like, well, if I'm building a brand, I want to make sure that like people trust my brand and people, trust my content, and I become someone that people rely on for information in this vertical, right? So it's just a different mentality. And for me, I've just been slammed so many times by doing whatever's the quickest way to do something in SEO. I've just played that game so much. I'm just so beyond doing that. I won't even start a site. Like, I could start any site in any niche at this point, but I just don't, because I know what it takes to build a brand, and it's difficult. It's hard. So yeah, that's my answer.
Pick accordingly.
So
pick carefully.
Yes.
Well, hey,
be
Nathan,
careful.
This has been fantastic. Where can people learn more about all the different things you have going on? We didn't talk about, you have a podcast, obviously a course. You publish a lot of content that I've been following for many years. Where can people kind of follow along? Give us the details.
Yeah, I mean, gotchseo.com, right here. Obviously, the best place to go. That's basically the hub for everything that I do. Obviously, I have Gotch SEO Academy, which is a much bigger investment, but I'm actually involved in this program where I help people on a weekly basis with their campaigns and their businesses. And then obviously on YouTube, that's probably where I publish the most content, is on YouTube. So you can just search Nathan Gotch. I publish occasionally on social too, on Twitter and LinkedIn, but once again, under Nathan Gotch. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much for coming on board. And
my pleasure.
I think people are going to want to listen to a couple times over again. So thanks for dropping so much knowledge there. I really appreciate having you.
Yeah, super glad to do it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, talk soon.